So I wanted to create a video to share my experience in depth, everything from feeling the call when I was first invited to the actual experience on the retreat, in the ceremonies, to the very long and ongoing integration that followed. Now, I come from this work with a background in very deep inner therapeutic work. I have 12 years plus of experience as a therapist. Now I'm a spiritual guide and coach, and I want to place plant medicine into a much bigger context. I want to help kind of take it off a pedestal a little bit, but at the same time also gently remove some of the fear-based narratives that maybe give it kind of an unfair reputation. The devil's in the details, right? This is also my way to help honor the medicine because I'm helping to organize and guide an upcoming retreat. I'm not serving the medicine. We are bringing a group to a shaman and his medicine team to receive the medicine. And I'm part of the team that helps with preparation and integration. And as people have been asking about my experience, I thought this is a good time to actually create a video like this. And my intention is not to try to convince you one way or another. I think that's already clear. I want you to get some real insight so that you can listen more carefully to your own discernment. And I do have some notes, but generally I'm just going to let myself riff a little bit. I'm going to talk about the call, the actual experience, and the integration process. The call, right? The medicine is said to call you. This is true of any medicine you work with, whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms or Wachuma or anything else. You develop a relationship with the medicine. The point isn't this is a substance I'm going to consume and it's going to do something to my body that will change me. That's how Westerners are taught to think. Actually, it's a relationship. You enter into a connection. Let's say you're going on a date with someone. You're not going to say, oh, what is this person going to do for me? And if you are, that is going to be your last date, right? You go into connection. You go, how are we together? What is it like for us to merge our energies in some way? Not to be codependent, but to connect. So the call is this elusive question of what does it mean to get the call? And so my experience was I had a friend who was in the world of psychedelics who had actually invited me on a number of retreats way closer to my house than I ended up going. She invited me several times, and each time I was like, why in the world would I go to something that's going to make me puke? I mean, there was no call there, right? And then at one point in my life, she messaged me again and she said, we're taking a retreat to Mexico. Are you interested? And I had the first initial kind of like, and kind of like a meh response. And then she sent me a picture of something from a recent retreat that she was on, with just like a picture of a communal table with nothing on it. And there was a jolt that went through my body that I'll never forget. I was just taken. And seriously, it was a nothing picture. It was just in a retreat center. It was like a wooden table. It wasn't the picture, it was the energy. That was how the medicine called me. So now, context for my life. I was living in a house that was killing me because we didn't know it, but there was mold in it. And I was getting more and more sick. I didn't know why. Everything just felt wrong except for my garden. There was a garden there that I really loved. And I was also feeling miserable in my work, and I didn't know why. I looked at it every which way and I couldn't figure it out. And so this kind of constellation of personal factors is what made for the fertile ground for when the invitation did come. I felt it. And I didn't think I had the money. And I looked at my husband and I was like, what am I gonna do? He's like, you're gonna go. And I was like, how are we gonna afford this? He's like, you'll figure it out. And I did. And I did. They offered me a payment plan. I was able to pay off in a few installments. It was fine. It really was. If you're holding on to money as the reason, now this is one of those tricky topics because there were times in my life that that was a very legitimate reason. Where if I'm really counting my pennies to go to the grocery store, this is not a time to spend $3,000 on a retreat. But in that point in my life, I wasn't counting pennies to go to the grocery store. And money was just something that I was able to hold on to for a brief second before I realized it was something to hold on to because all of a sudden I was in the field of the unknown and I realized I have to go. And I didn't have a whole lot of mental constructs about the call. I just kind of knew that that's what it was. What happens later for people is that, especially after you've had a ceremony or two or three or what have you, it starts to potentially get a little muddled in terms of what is a call? What does a call actually feel like? Because your ego gets in the way. Your mind starts chattering. Is it the right time? Is it the right location? Is it? And the thing is, those are legitimate questions, right? You want to ask all the questions. You want to know who's serving the medicine. You want to know all the things, all the things. And we'll talk about a lot of the things. But if you are hung up on something about the details, that may be your ego getting in the way and chattering on about the details when your soul is asking for healing. So you may be finding signs to go or not to go. You may be, I like to dream on things, right? So if there's a big question in my field and I want to get some input that doesn't come from my brain, because I know my brain is just a machine with a big filter over it that's called we gotta survive. So I like to dream on it. I like to go to bed and intend for a dream. Sometimes it takes a few nights with the question of, is this the right path for me or something like that? That's a good way to receive, in whatever way you can receive guidance and wisdom that doesn't come from your brain box, because that brain box is going to want to try to put everything into a box. It's going to want to make it logical and reasonable and so forth. As I've just shared, my experience was not logical or reasonable, right? And it was just a jolt. It was, I have to go. In one moment, from one moment to the next, my life changed in that moment when I realized I have to go and I'm gonna figure out how. So I'm gonna move on to the next kind of big chunk of my talk here to talk about the experience, the actual experience. Now, again, when you hear people talk about plant medicine, they jump straight to the actual ceremony, right? When they eat the mushrooms or when they drink the ayahuasca, and then what unfolds. But the thing is, getting there, the actual journey, first of all, I've already mentioned, there's the payments, right? There's the preparation. There's the, however it is that you prepare with the diet, with the mindset, with your intentions. There is so much that happens on the journey between saying yes to actually arriving, let alone to actually then taking the medicine. That is also rarely talked about. It's so important. Your intentions and your preparation are such a huge part. The medicines, particularly ayahuasca, but all of them, respond to what it is that you are inquiring about. They're not going to give you the experience you think they're going to give you, or that, that whole story of like you get what you need, not what you want, or not what you think you need. Fine, that's true. But your intentions are still the core of how you enter into the medicine. My intentions were, why am I miserable in my work? And I didn't know again that there was mold in the house, and there was something happening where I was having throat symptoms, esophagus, and wasn't able to swallow large chunks of like anyway, it was intense and it was scary, and I was seeing a functional medicine doctor and I couldn't figure it out. I didn't have the money. I didn't think I had the money or the way to find a way to get tested. And so those were my two big areas. Why, what's going on with my throat? Of course, I was questioning the throat chakra. What am I not saying? What am I swallowing? What am I blocking myself from expressing? All the things, right? And I knew it was somehow related to my work theoretically, but I didn't really know. And so that's what I came into the ceremony, the retreat with as a starting point. And what else do I want to share about the preparation? It was a fairly general kind of space in terms of how the retreat was guided. Not the retreat, the participants, those of us who were joining, we were given all the information, we were given the details about the diet, when to start it, things like that, the medical guidelines, the when do you need to be off of all of the herbs or supplements or medicines or what have you. So that was really important. And if you are going on a retreat, that really needs to be a part of it. Because, and I'll throw this in here now, the fearful reports that you get, I've heard people say, people die on ayahuasca. People die on ayahuasca when they have an undiagnosed heart condition of some sort that would have made it a contraindication. People go crazy when they have an undiagnosed mental health condition that would have been a contraindication. You actually do need a strong sense of self, and you need a strong ego to be able to go into a ceremony that expands your perception of yourself. That's just a given. And so there's a lot of fear mongering around this. So the people that had horrible experiences, they're either experiencing some kind of possession or attack that they just were unprepared for and didn't even know how to name and didn't know how to deal with, and therefore didn't get support with, and then awful traumatizing things happen. That's real. That's real. That's why you need to ask all the questions and you need to trust the people that are serving you the medicine. And if, let's say, you're going on this retreat that I'm helping organize, and you know me, or you've talked to me and you trust me, right? That's enough. You don't necessarily have to go to Peru, meet the shaman, feel safe, feel grounded, and then sit with medicine. If you have that opportunity, by all means, right? But it's not necessary. I trusted my friend. My friend was very trustworthy. She had a lot of experience with plant medicine, both the good and the not so good. And so when she invited me to this journey, I knew I could trust her judgment, right? But that's important. It is important that you go into it in your preparation, that there isn't a little niggling question in there, like, is this going to be safe? Is this going to be held? Is this going to be protected? Am I going to feel fully supported, right? So, in terms of naming your intentions, that's something to do on your own and or with someone that helps you prepare. It's not likely that it's going to happen within the group. Within the group, you will share. You will have an opportunity to share what your intentions are, what your questions are. But in terms of getting support in how to actually articulate, what is it that I'm really asking? It may seem simple, but you really want to drill down to the bedrock of what is it I'm really asking? If let's say, should I take this job? I'm just picking something at random. It's not ever going to be a yes or no question. And then you drill down, why am I asking this? What is the real question here? Is it, am I going to feel appreciated? Am I going to feel fulfilled in this work? Right now, there's a question. What's fulfillment like for me? So you see, you have to go deeper. You have to find the kernel, the real question, the real question. You have to find what is it that you're actually asking. So where do I want to go with this? I was talking about needing to trust the people that are serving you the medicine. And I think this is a good space, and I may have to bounce back and forth a little bit, but this is a good moment to share what my actual ceremony experience was. And I will say, I was very, very nervous, and a lot of people are. We had a Zoom call, one of the preparatory Zoom calls to which the shaman was invited, and he was there, and he was such a beautiful soul. And when he spoke, one of the first things he said was, do not fear the medicine. The medicine loves you. The medicine is there to help you heal. The fear arises. Now, this is me kind of expanding on this. The fear arises out of the ego that knows that the status quo is about to be shaken up, right? That something is about to shift in a way that the ego cannot control. And so it makes you scared. What if I lose my mind? What if I lose my shit? What if all of the questions and all of the, what if I can't handle it? That arises. And so it was so helpful for me to have the shaman tell us, do not fear the medicine. I was still scared, but I tucked that away, that advice. And I figured my friend who invited me trusts this person. She has experience. And this person, this shaman and his team, not only do they know how to serve the medicine and hold space, but they know how to tell when all is going well and it's just difficult. Okay, one scenario. Or when difficult becomes dangerous, and they are trained to intervene when it's time. And so, still, my ego was terrified. I had to really hold on to my nervous system practices, my breath work, my connecting to my friend, and I didn't know anyone else in the group. And I couldn't really even hold on to her because you're separated, right, from each other. If you do come with a spouse or a friend, do not sit next to each other. Your energies are too close. You're going to interfere with each other's experiences, and you're going to actually rob yourself of having your own. So there's not a whole lot to hold on to other than, you know what? Spirit got me here somehow. I got myself here somehow. My higher self knows what's what more than my ego does. And at some point, you let go and you trust the process and you let it happen. And you trust the guides that are with you, that are around you. And there should be a good number, right? For this retreat, there's going to be six of us in total for up to 15 or 16 people. That's a good ratio. You want to make sure that there is enough support. So there's so much more to say. And I do feel like it's important. I do feel like these details actually matter. I'm not speaking to your ego here, right? There, your ego may be gathering some tidbits here and there, especially if you've never done this before and you want to kind of grasp onto what's it really going to be like. And I honestly, that can be really helpful to just understand you're going to be in a room on a cot, or like a mattress, like a pad. And if it's a retreat, there's several people around you, and there's going to be a conversation beforehand, and there's going to be a particular process happening. Like it can be really helpful to know that. I didn't really know. I honestly didn't know which questions to ask, and I kind of marvel at that because now that we're talking to people, they are asking such amazing questions before they ever sign anything. I was like, okay, let's go, and I'm a scaredy cat a lot of times. So the fact that I was ready to dive off the high board, I was actually really suffering in my life, and I didn't know how much until after. So the ceremony was in something called a maloka, which is a ceremonial space. It was screened so the bugs wouldn't get in. This was in Mexico. And they go around the room and you come up one at a time and you receive your cup. I'm talking about ayahuasca. You receive your cup, you drink it right in front of the shaman, and then you give the cup back and you go back to your cot and or your mattress and you wait. You meditate, you breathe, and I drink the thing and I sit back down. I'm like, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? And there's no going back, right? I mean, I suppose you could go throw it up, but you're not going to. I was like, oh my God, I flew to Mexico. I paid $3,000+. I'm here. I'm gonna do this, right? But there's that part. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I was so terrified of what would happen. And my first lesson was that my body processes medicine way slower than most people's. I at first, after everybody takes the medicine and it's dark and people are lying down or sitting up and it's just quiet. At some point, the shaman starts to play medicine music. But initially it's quiet. And then I start hearing people kind of moaning or groaning or crying. Some people started throwing up. There was a person next to me that started throwing up right away, like within 10 minutes, and he kind of like didn't stop most of the night. And I'm sitting there being like, is something supposed to happen? Because I don't know, everybody's having something and I'm not feeling anything. It was like an hour and a half, and the only reason I know how long it was is because they told us about an hour and a half later, there will be an opportunity to go take a second cup. And I thought, okay, that's like a marker, right? And so nothing was happening for me other than kind of like boredom or a little bit of anxiety. But after that, pounding kind of calmed down after a while. I'm sitting there 45 minutes, an hour, nothing's going on. And then I hear the shaman say, if you'd like a second cup, you can come up now. And some people start coming up, like they're already aware that they need a second cup. And by the way, the instruction we receive for how to know whether to take the second cup is if you're feeling the effects of the medicine, but your mind is still very active. You're still thinking, you're still trying to like brain your way through it. That's how you know you need more medicine. So the shaman says, and come up for a second cup. And I'm like, as people started taking their second cup, and I really thought maybe I should go up because that wasn't enough medicine, that's when it hit me. And then I started feeling it, and then I started feeling woozy and kind of shaky, and I just started feeling the effects. Believe it or not, that was my first ever psychedelic journey of any sort, except that I had a cannabis experience where I had tried cannabis for the first time at like age 41 because it became legal, and I thought I was always a goody two shoes and let me try it. And I tried it. I had an edible, and it took me on a psychedelic journey on like it was an actual, it wasn't like the giggles or whatever. I sobbed for like 4 hours. I had an ego dissolution. I had the whole nine. And that's probably what actually prepared me to even accept the idea of sitting with ayahuasca a couple years later. But that was it. I'd never had mushrooms. I'd never been on a retreat like this. And so I started having the effects of the medicine, and I didn't need to throw up for quite a while. Initially, I just kind of actually just had a lot of mental spinning. In retrospect, I realized I actually did need a second cup. Need, as in that matched the instructions we received, right? Which is if your mind is still spinning, get a second cup because that's what helps kind of move more of the psychological defenses, more of the ego out of the way so that you can experience yourself differently. But I didn't really clock that until later because this is my first experience. I didn't really have anything to compare it to. And even though we had that instruction, I still was like, well, I feel like me. I'm just a chatterbox in there. So that's how it is, right? So I had a lot of chattering. I had a lot of insights around how the mind swings. I was kept thinking about pendulums and how we go to this idea and then we go to this idea and then we come up with this way of thinking about life and then it swings over and so it was kind of a mess and kind of at this point not really relevant. So what was relevant was a little bit later. So I did not take a second cup because I then once the medicine hit me, I was like, holy crap, that is a lot. And I did not want any more. I don't know, a couple hours into it, I needed to go to the bathroom. There was my first struggle with I need to ask for help because I can't really get up on my own. I was wobbly and shaky and a little trembly and you have to walk a few feet to go to the bathroom and you can't just raise your hand because it's dark and nobody's looking around the room with that much precision all the time, right? You can, but you'd be sitting there for a while or lying down. So you have to speak up and there's music happening, so you have to speak up kind of loudly, right? So that was my first kind of struggle with that and also insight into here I am. These people are here to serve. These people told us how to ask for support and help, and yet I struggled initially. But I did. I just said help. And this beautiful angel who is still in my life, her name is Natalia, heard my voice, came over. We both spoke Russian, and we knew this before going into the ceremony. I was the only Russian speaker in this group. And so, and what's interesting is that Natalia did not speak English at all. English is my second language, but I've been speaking it for 30 years, whereas left Russia when I was 11. So I had to speak Russian with her. So we're walking to the bathroom, and now I have my first conversation while I'm in medicine. And I start saying something about how overwhelming or how my mind is chattering or something like that. And then I say, I never talked to anybody about my life in Russian. It's the language I was born into. It's the language of my body, right? It's there's something that happens when the original language that you are imprinted with. And so here we are speaking like what a like one in a gazillion chance that I would be in medicine processing stuff and need to actually go back to the cradle language that I was born into to express to someone what's going on. So we go to the bathroom, we're coming back, and as we're approaching the Maloka again, all of a sudden, so the Maloka is dark, right? And there's some candles, and there's candlelight outside the Maloka, so it's a little bit lighter. And you're outside. And as we're approaching to go back inside, I say to Natalia, I'm like, I'm not ready to go back in. Can I stay out here? Can we stay? And she said, sure. And so we sit down on this little ledge and we're talking. And this is an important piece. The right facilitator is everything, everything, because she was there for the moment where I named a core trauma. And she caught it. She understood that when I said, I don't want to go back in there, and I must have said something, I don't remember at this point, but where I was like, I'm too alone in there because you're alone on your cot. And here I am getting to have a little chat with someone. And I started unpacking this abandonment wound that I had since I was an infant. My mother was a single mom in a city, raising me absolutely alone because her parents were in a different city. And this is in the early 80s where we didn't even have a phone in the apartment. So she had to raise me alone, leave me in the crib for hours to go stand in a line for eggs or eggplants or whatever. And so I understood through that process of talking to Natalia about it that my mother was doing the absolute best that she could. And that wasn't enough for my little body, for my little nervous system, because I internalized emptiness and abandonment and aloneness. And so Natalia told me, when you lie on that cot in the Maloka, the reason you feel alone is because you're reliving your trauma. You're reliving the abandonment. And I cried and cried and cried on her shoulder. And I had this moment of looking at this one tall candle that was standing to light the walkway. And I was like, my mom had this much. And I pointed to the flame. It's like she had this much. And she did her absolute best. And I forgave her. And I didn't even know that she needed forgiving. I didn't know. I had mentalized so much about this. I had understood mentally, I had understood that this is how my childhood was, and I thought I had released it in whatever ways because I talked about it in therapy. By the way, I had had 12 years of therapy prior to this experience. I had talked about all this abandonment. I had attached myself to my therapists and had all kinds of attachment stuff. We talked all about it, and yet never actually reached this. And as I looked at that little candle, that big candle with the little flame. It's like seared into my mind, where I was just telling Natalia, I'm like, my mom did everything she could. She was 23. Good grief. I was at 23, I was a mess. There is no way I could have done any good for a baby, right? And my mother was even more of a mess. So that was one of the first, and this is really the most key takeaway for this experience for me, that the right facilitator was everything. And how amazing that she spoke Russian. I can't even, I can't even, I don't know if I would have been able to go there in the same depth, in the same precision, if it were in English. I really don't know. It's possible. I think it's possible, but I don't know. Uh, but it taught me so much about the right intervention at the right time. And what was interesting too, we had this, it was probably a 20-minute, I don't know, time was so wonky. I don't think it was more than 20 minutes that we had this whole process. I bawled on her shoulder. It was so healing to have someone simply hold that space, and just, she never commented on my crying. She just let me cry. And then I had to go to the bathroom again. So she walked me back to the bathroom, and on our way back, I wanted to sit back down again. And that's when she caught it that I didn't want to go back and relive the trauma again, because now I was afraid. And now I was like, oh, I have the comfort of talking to you. And she said, you can stay outside if you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. She's like, I'm going to go inside because I need to go back in there. And I really recommend that at some point you go back inside and you lay down and you keep experiencing what you're experiencing. And that was another really, really profound teaching to receive in that moment, that what she was saying is, you're stronger than you think you are. You think you're being dismantled by your trauma. You think you can't handle what's going to come up, but you can. And so I sat for a little bit, and then I did go back in there, and I did have a very different experience after that. I did actually purge quite a bit. And I think that had to do with the fact that I was able to bring all of the emotional stuff up to the surface. I cried, but then I also threw up, and it was a big relief, by the way. Throwing up with ayahuasca was one of my biggest fears for going in previous invitations. I hate the experience of feeling nauseous, and that, like, am I gonna throw up? Am I not gonna throw up? Like, ooh, that. With ayahuasca, it's not like that, at least for me. There was never a question. There was never like a retching or like a, is it gonna happen or not? Do I have to stand over this bucket? Like, I was like, I think I'm gonna throw up. Ugh. Like, it was so instantaneous and so kind of pure in the way that it just flowed out when it was time to flow out. And it was a relief. It really was. Not that I look forward to that, but it was not traumatic in the way that I was afraid it would be. So there's another lesson for me there. One of the most profound parts of the ceremony, kind of woven throughout, is the medicine music. So the shaman and whoever else plays whatever instruments will play medicine songs in ceremony, and the medicine songs deserve their own video. They deserve their own entire treatment, but I really wanted to mention it here because it was actually just so profound, especially in moments when things felt really difficult for me, and I've heard this from other people as well. Kind of tuning into the music that was happening in the room, mostly guitar, but there were some other instruments played as well. It was just one of those ways to come back to my soul, to come back to my body, to come back to something solid. And I've since learned that these medicine songs are indeed medicine songs. They are channeled, they are brought forward through the medicine itself, and then they're passed down and then they're played over and over. So it's not like they're channeling the entire time in ceremony, but they are actually the carriers of the medicine. They help the medicine move through the room, through the person, through our bodies. And I can't even describe it. And knowing what happened for me afterward, and the fact that this ended up inspiring me to pick up the guitar for the first time in my life at age 42, shortly after the retreat, I was just so intrigued because they had sent us some songs to listen to before the retreat so that they would feel a little bit familiar. Most of them did not feel familiar because it's a long ceremony and they can only play the familiar ones so many times, right? But it was just so incredible and really worth just having this be part of your awareness of the fact that medicine music really is a huge part of especially ayahuasca ceremonies. But every ceremony I've been in has had medicine music. It's just usually recorded and played, as a playlist. And the fact that it was live music, it made all the difference. At a certain point, I guess it was I think people were already taking their third cup. There was no way in hell I was taking more medicine. But it was towards the end where I started having this experience where and it's like, I can't even tell you, it wasn't visual and it wasn't visceral. I don't know. It was imaginal, I guess, as in within my experience, kind of the way a dream would be or the way a shamanic journey would be. But I started having the sense that I was moving through a birth canal. And again, I don't have a whole lot of words to tell you what that really means, but I started moving through there was a movement. I was moving forward. And at some point, I was wrung out and I lay back on my cot and I could swear I would bet money on it. There was a light shining on my face, as in like a street lamp or something. And there was none. There was none. There was no light on my face. It was a sense. It was, the medicine giving me this experience. And I just lay there like relieved a little bit. And at that moment, the shaman was passing through from the entrance back to his altar. And he looked at me and he said, "You look like a baby." And all I could do was smile. And we had not talked. He had no idea what I went through. He had none of that. And so there was a rebirth that happened that, again, is hard to put into words. And I'm the only one who knows it's true, right? I can explain it to you. And maybe if you've had an experience like that, you can kind of say, yeah, I know that can happen. But one of those things about this medicine and any medicine is your experience is yours. And we do want someone to validate it and hear it and hold it, but you don't always get to. You don't always get to have that sense that somebody really has seen it. And that's one of those things, one of those takeaways is to know how to validate and acknowledge your own experience, whether anyone sees it or not. And so I had one of these rebirth moments. Next thing was that everyone was already kind of mostly out of the medicine. And because I had the slower onset, I also had the longer experience. So that was a little bit wonky because people are starting to chat. People are starting to want to share. They're starting to want to socialize a little bit more because they've just been through a whole journey. They've been through, maybe they've been through hell and they're looking for support, or maybe they've been through heaven and they're looking to just gush about it. And that can happen with kind of different people having different processing times, let's say. I've had this, I've since have found out that this is kind of how my body works, and it's the same with mushrooms. And I would have mushroom journeys in a retreat setting where everybody's already having dinner and I'm still like full on in medicine. And a good facilitator knows how to kind of sequester people so that if you are still in medicine, you're given that full space to do what you need to do to go finish it properly without interference. It was a little, a little uneasy when 20 people are starting to talk and I'm still very much in medicine, and there was a second ceremony the next night that I knew was coming up, and I was like, there is no way in hell I'm going through this again. And I just honored that. The thing is, and what I was told is that the second journey is never the same as the first. You don't just relive your trauma again, or you don't just relive the next layer or the next trauma. It's very different. But I needed to honor that I had been through something so profound that was enough for me for the trip. That was enough for the retreat. We did have another a ceremony with Wachuma 2 days later, and I did do that one. And honestly, if there had been one night between the ayahuasca ceremonies, I probably would have done a second journey. But the next day, there was no way. I wasn't ready. I was still just like flabbergasted. I don't even have the words. It was so intense. Like, what the hell just happened, right? So once I did come kind of mostly back down, this was a retreat center, so I was able to just walk over to my room and get in bed. And I'm a writer. I like writing things down. I like journaling, and I was still not quite back to where I could put things into words. And so in my journal that night, I wrote one sentence. And it said, a birth goes as well as it can. And I just think that's the most poignant, profound thing I could have said about the entire thing. Like I said, there was a rebirth, but it was also so messy, so intense. There was another experience that I had within that journey after Natalia went into her back back to her spot in the Maloka, and I stayed outside. I had this whole meeting with a person, one of the participants that I will just keep private, but I will just say that it was life-changing. I looked at this person and I was just like, this is my brother. And not my actual biological brother, you understand, right? I had a soul connection and I had more insights, and he and I chatted a little bit. And it was so profound, but it was messy, right? Natalia says you should try to go back inward. And here I was chatting with someone, and is this me avoiding? Am I trying to defy her, or am I trying to avoid something internal? So all the pendulum thoughts, and if I think this, then I have to stop thinking that. If I let go of this, what about this? It was messy. It was messy. So when you hear all these reports of people saying ayahuasca changed my life, or, they're pointing to kind of one or two big insights or big things that shifted as kind of a shorthand, right? I now say ayahuasca changed my life, right? I say that. but it's a shorthand. At this point, it's a shorthand for all of this other stuff that's why I'm talking about this and sharing this and wanted to be out there. So the next morning, we gathered, we had breakfast, started chatting about what was going, what happened the night before. And then we gathered in the Maloka and went around the circle, and everybody shared a few minutes of what happened for them. And the shaman listened and shared his perspectives. He was very mindful and thoughtful of responding to each person, actually hearing what they were saying and making a comment or two, which I thought was needed, but not a given that that would happen. So I thought that was a really beautiful thing about this particular shaman, which is also why that's who we're taking this group to in June. And I want to keep working with him because not just the integrity, but the care. I've heard of shamans, and Natalia has since told me that she sat with 7 other shamans after him before returning to him, where they treated like a job, where they treated like, um, well, I'm here to serve the medicine. The medicine called me. I'm doing my thing. But they don't actually want to get into it with you. They don't want to hear your individual experience and respond to your individual process. So that was really beautiful and profound. And the experiences were so varied. There were people who witnessed their past lives. There were people who just saw their current parents and their current trauma. There were people who were reliving the birth of their child and getting to do it differently from how it went. I mean, so varied, so varied. A lot of emotional releases, of course, because what happens? The medicine lifts the defenses that are normally there that are keeping us from weeping about our abandonment or our divorce or our, um, the deaths that we experienced. You know, I was asking about my throat and I was asking about my misery in my work. And how does that line up with the experience of reliving my abandonment and like that whole trauma and forgiving my mother? Well, because they are, because this is why they say the medicine gives you what you need, because you don't necessarily know how symptoms or life situations are constellated based on your trauma. Natalia was telling me, you have this inner child that is still screaming for love and attention. I got so mad at her for saying that. I was mad at her for days. I was so angry. I was like, Natalia, I have done 12 years of deep analysis. Do you really think I haven't touched or dealt with my inner child? And that's not what she was saying. Of course I did. What she was saying is that there was more and it was deeper, deeper than I knew. And of course, over time, as I thought about it and processed it and integrated more deeply, I realized that so much of my therapy had happened mentally. It happened in my head, in part because it was psychoanalysis and that's kind of how it's done. And in part because I was afraid to get into my body. I was afraid to go into these experiences and actually live them through and actually feel them through fully the way I did with the medicine. This is where one of my biggest takeaways um, from this whole thing is the fact that you take time away from your life, right? You leave things behind. You let somebody else handle the money and the children and the dogs and the dusting and the whatever, right? And you make space in your life for healing. That alone tends to be transformational for people. That alone, the fact that you leave everything behind, you clear the deck, so to speak, and then you arrive for yourself. So even if you don't do plant medicine and you just come to a transformational retreat by itself without medicine, you receive something so much more deeply. You have the space to receive it so much more deeply because you've set aside all this other stuff. And all this other stuff is needed, and you're going to get back to it, and it's going to be there. And I'm not saying it's dumb or it's useless, but it needs to you need to be able to set it aside sometimes. And so when I realized how powerful it is to step away from your life and face the real you, however painful that may be, when you have the right guidance, it can mean everything. And that's why I'm so passionate about creating these spaces, whether they're an hour and a half on Zoom or, a week and a half in Peru or whatever in between. How important it is for us to create these spaces where we can find the ways around the ego, find opportunities, create opportunities, allow opportunities to set aside the ego, to set aside the chatter. And I don't mean the chatter that happens all the time, I mean the chatter of life. To allow something else in is profound. And so integration, which is the third piece, I've already been talking about it. It starts with sharing your experience the day after, and it never ends. It never ends. They'll say you'll be integrating 6 to 9 months. Okay. But the thing is, once the medicine has affected you, whichever medicine, it's you're different. You are now changed. You are now changed forever. And if you are lucky and you've done some deeper processing like I got to do with Natalia, or after, if you've gotten to speak to an integration guide like myself or like a therapist who knows how to do this kind of work, and you've gotten to really understand not just what happened, what it means for your life, what it means for your soul, what it means for your purpose in life. I mean, this integration is ever unfolding. And I used to feel a little bit insecure about the fact that I'd only sat with ayahuasca the one time, one ceremony, one cup. There are people who have sat in 20, 50, 100 ceremonies, endless, right? That does not mean that they have done deeper work. It does not. There are people who, now the medicine itself is not addictive, right? None of the medicines are addictive. Nobody's addicted to, trauma work, right? You're just not. We're not wired like that. We're wired to avoid it. But people get addicted to the process, to the experience, oh, I'm going to go to another ceremony, and kind of they end up in this cyclical place of thinking that the medicine is what does the work, and it does not. The medicine peels back the layers of who you think you are so that you can have a peek and have a couple of hours to experience yourself as you really are. And sometimes that's a raw, throbbing, gushing wound. And maybe that's what you are for a while. It's not all you are, but that's what the medicine allows you to see so that you have the information about, well, what do I do with this? What needs to happen? What kind of changes do I need to make in my life? Now that I know I'm a gaping wound, maybe I'll take care of myself differently. Maybe I'll go get a therapist, or maybe I will go get a journal, or maybe I will sit with this more deeply in some way, right? It gives you clear sight if you have the eyes to see it. And sometimes people don't. Sometimes people think that, okay, I didn't get enough, so I'm going to go get more medicine. And so the cycle of feeling called again becomes a little bit more complex, because then you have to find ways to discern, is this me wanting to avoid some inner work, and I'm going to say the medicine's going to do it for me, even if I don't ever actually say that out loud, but or is this me having gotten as far as I can get within where I am, and I'm ready to peel back something for a little bit so that I can see what else real is there that I am not seeing right now, that I'm ready to see right now. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of how to discern a real call from an avoidant call. I was talking about it in the beginning about your mind trying to come up with reasons and pros and cons and all of that. Uh, but this is another layer to it, right? So, I haven't even talked about the Wachuma experience. I think I'll save it for a different video. I think this one's gotten very long. The reason Wachuma was offered in this retreat, and I love this reason, is that ayahuasca takes you so many places. It takes you to your trauma, it can take you to the astral, it can take you to your past lives. It's like a travel process, right? And Wachuma puts you in your body and puts you in your heart. And it's a very grounding medicine. And you also get lots of insights and visceral processes. And I learned a tremendous amount about myself and as a healer and as an empath through the experience of Wachuma. But yeah, that changed my life. That was over 2 years ago, and I am still connected, like I said, to the shaman and to Natalia and to another person there. And I've met several people who have become friends that were just destined to meet at that point. And I started really seeing the difference between talking about your stuff or writing about, because like I said, I'm a writer, I journal a lot. The difference between writing and processing and how important that can be, but also this other layer of actually going in and actually meeting yourself for real. And in those experiences when I was just so everywhere, it was so messy, it was so difficult. And I would watch people really struggling as well. And I had this sense of, we really are walking each other home. It really is so difficult to be human. I had so much compassion for people who are not capable at all, even mentally, to go into their traumas, to go into their past, to confront their issues, because it really is, it just takes so much. It's so profoundly, I don't know, disruptive to the system. And then you have to re-repair and you have to reshape and reform. And that's what integration is. And I really got this deep appreciation for anyone who does any kind of work on any level, for how much courage that actually takes, how profoundly challenging that is. And then if you do take the next step of going into a plant medicine journey, that is so commendable and so like not something to aspire to if that's not what you're called to do. That's not what I'm talking about, but just how for the soul, for your soul to be willing to see beyond the masks and beyond the layers is just profound, so profound. I have such love and such just admiration for anyone who is willing and dares to do it. I hope this has been useful, helpful. I hope this has helped you see something that you maybe needed to see about this process. I am very open to questions. Feel free to message me privately or leave a comment if you'd like me to respond publicly. I am here. I am open. I love you. And this is my guitar. Her name is Lucy. And I've been playing for Lucita. I've been playing for a little over a year. Wow. So this is super vulnerable and terrifying and amazing. So thank you for just holding space.